Alright, I want to see if I can fit in this response to Telemantros' video titled False Mormon Prophets. I've had a few interchanges with Telemantros, both on his videos and otherwise, and I like the guy, but he's fallen into a lot of similar, actually a lot of them are rather old and long since refuted issues that he tries to point out here that he sees as problems. He sums these four concerns up into altering the Bible, are the prophets today, is all doctrine acceptable, and false prophecies. So I'll just kind of systematically go through this. He talks about altering the Bible, brings out points in which Joseph Smith, in the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible, had changed things, or seemingly changed things. A lot of this is based on perception, and I think it's interesting because you got, for example, he talks about him removing, the book of the Song of Solomon's. It'd be interesting to see you do a doctrinal defense of the Song of Solomon's, but that's kind of beside the point. If you get into the book of Revelations and the stuff you bring up, I've already pointed this out in one of the comments, but you bring up Revelations 5:6, and in that Joseph Smith has having 12 or 7 horns changed to 12 horns. Speaking of these 4 beasts in the midst of the elders. Now, as I pointed out in my comment, and this applies also to the Deuteronomy stuff that you have, is if you're going under the assumption that this hasn't happened, but actually the fact that God puts the warning in there seems to indicate at some point it will happen. And I think the fact that you don't know of people that have been punished and you don't know of people that have changed it doesn't mean that the Bible hasn't been changed. I don't know of all people who have suffered all of the punishments described in the Old Testament. There are some described, but just because we don't know of people that were punished by those means laid forth in the Mosaic Law doesn't mean there weren't people that broke those laws. So the whole assumption you have that the Bible hasn't been changed, and thus we wouldn't need to be restored, is just, there's no basis for it. Moving on, you say, let's see, you ask why the Mormon Church only prints excerpts of the Joseph Smith translation rather than doing the entire book. And I'd have to say, I think part of that is the fact that the whole Bible, to my understanding, has not been corrected. There's also issues with the fact that the Community of Christ, which was formerly known as the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I believe they have the manuscripts to some degree, but so I don't know all the details on that, but I do know that it's not necessary at present that we have the whole Bible completely corrected as it was. There's some interesting points, though. This isn't in regard to Joseph Smith translation, but with regard to the Isaiah verses in the Book of Mormon, and I'll hopefully be able to get into that later, either in this video or in an upcoming video. Get into Mormon leadership. The question, are there prophets today? Point out Amos 3:7, and you say that Amos 3:7 is that it's taken out of context, that us saying that God will do nothing save he reveal his secrets to his servant the prophets is let me just make sure I'm saying this right. Oh, you state that Jesus was the final prophet. Well, if you believe in the book of Revelations, which I guess you do because you're citing it in your previous points, there's a little problem with that, because in there it states that the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus. So if you didn't have the spirit of prophecy and hence weren't a prophet, then you don't have the testimony of Jesus. Aside from that fact, another point in the book of Revelations, I believe it's either chapter 9 or 11, but where it speaks of 2 witnesses that would go forth in the last days before Christ come, They would go forth, you'll notice that it states that they would go forth prophesying. It's kind of weird to think of a prophet not prophesying. And if you'll also look at the warnings Christ gave to beware of false prophets, it would be kind of, excuse this, but in my view it would be kind of stupid to warn of false prophets if all future prophets were going to be false. Why wouldn't Christ just say, don't listen to anybody after me? And that's what Muhammad did. But, moving on then. Your claim that there are no more prophets, that's just a screwy way of looking at Luke 16:16. It's referring to the law and the prophets as in the Old Testament, the Old Covenant, the Mosaic Law is passed on. There are clearly prophets because after Christ was taken up, you had a replacement for Judas called, and Paul was called, and if he wasn't a prophet, we got some explaining to do on that, at least by me. You say, and if I miss some of the stuff, I'm sorry, I'm trying to clip through your video as fast as I can. I don't have a lot of time. Mormon doctrine, how do Mormons know which revelation to accept and which to reject? Then you bring forth the Adam God doctrine as rejected while other revelation is accepted. I might put forward that the statements by Brigham Young are not what's rejected. What has been rejected with the Adam God theory is extrapolations and assumptions people made about what Brigham Young was saying in those verses, and that's what's rejected. The actual words of Brigham Young are not rejected. That clears up that. If it doesn't, feel free to ask. And things are voted on as far as canon, but prophecy is independent of canon. I mean, things can be canon and not, or can be prophecy and not considered church canon. Then you go on to talk about things you perceive as false prophecies. You talk about how to detect a false prophet, referring to, I believe, the Old Testament. Talking about contradictions, and if a single prophecy fails, then the person's a false prophet. And you go to the, it's really kind of sad because a lot of antis use this, and it's just horribly, they just aren't reading it. They aren't understanding it. And the sad thing is that if you take this reading in this way, it's even harsher on Christ in the New Testament. But you bring up the period where it says, yea, the word of the Lord concerning his church established in the last days for the restoration of his people, as he has spoken by the mouth of his prophets, and for the gathering of his saints to stand upon Mount Zion, which shall be the city of New Jerusalem, which cities shall be built, beginning at the temple lot, which is appointed by the finger of the Lord, in the western boundaries of the state of Missouri, and dedicated by the hand of Joseph Smith, Jr., and others with whom the Lord was well pleased. Verily, this is the word of the Lord, that the city of New Jerusalem shall be built by the gathering of the saints, beginning at this place. Now, you're assuming, when it says beginning at this place, that it's talking about Missouri, Independence, Missouri, the temple. In this place, even the place of the temple, which temple shall be reared in this generation. What you don't seem to realize, and many don't realize when they read this, is if you go to the description above that section of Doctrine and Covenants, you'll see where it was given. That this place is referring to the place it was given, which is Kirtland, Ohio. And the temple was built there in that generation, and that was where the gospel started from. That is where the keys were restored to Joseph Smith in the Kirtland temple, and that's where it would come forth in that generation. To kind of move on to that, and to touch on the points I was talking about, referring to the word generation. If you look at Matthew 24, you'll see that Christ says, verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. If you go earlier in that chapter, it covers great signs and wonders. And the kinds of signs and wonders it's describing haven't happened yet.